Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, author, artist, mother, and certified recovery coach.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, entrepreneur, girl dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, a premier substance abuse and mental health treatment program.
With the collective experience of 21 years working in the mental health field, we are excited to bring to you a safe and fun place to talk all things mental health.
We will be interviewing experts, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals in the entertainment industry to better educate, inform, and inspire our community to have positive mental wealth.
Welcome back to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove, along with my other co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky.
Rachel.
Whatever. Today we have in the studio Mistress Damiana Chi. Ph.D. has been a professional and lifestyle dominatrix for over 2 decades in Los Angeles. She is the owner of the Chi Temple, an elegantly appointed private BDSM studio. She holds a Ph.D. in clinical psychology, an M.A. in counseling psychology, a B.A. in behavioral sciences, and is a certified sexologist specializing in kink-centered life coaching. She is the founder of the Evolutionary Dominatrix Academy, in which she personally mentors women from all parts of the world online in the art of conscious female domination with her self-developed psychologically based methodology, the Dominatrix archetype, as well as an in-depth focus in submissive psychology. She is the creator of Conscious Kink Community, a social networking platform exclusive to personally vetted members who share a like-minded consciousness of respect and support in a safe container where all can share and connect about anything kink related. She is also the host of Lightworkers Who Play in the Dark podcast, which provides a glimpse into the real world of BDSM, kink, and erotic domination and the intricacies of the lives of people who live in it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, so I found you, which I was so surprised at how quickly you got back to me because I was so excited that you existed, because honestly, for months I had told Arthur that I wanted to find someone who really specializes in BDSM and really explore that world. And then I watched the Armie Hammer documentary on HBO, and there you were. And I immediately...
You manifested
I
me.
manifested. Oh, I definitely did. I'm a huge manifester. So let's just start. I have so many questions, but the first question is how did you get involved in the world of BDSM?
Well, it was kind of an accident, but not because it was fated as well. But I was in my master's program for counseling psychology, and during this time there was an assignment given to me, and that was pick a disorder out of the DSM-4. It was the 4th edition of the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and that's like the Bible of, what psychologists, psychiatrists use to diagnose people. Mm-hmm. So it was right about any of these disorders, and they all look pretty depressing. And so I picked sexual masochism because it was the only one that was interesting to me. That was like, oh, this is something, I would definitely dive into this. Plus, my sister had a guy who was like her quote-unquote slave. He was just an errand boy. He was just like run errands for her, go to the post office and the grocery store and things like that for her, and she called him her slave. She knew nothing about it either. He approached her. I don't know how they met, but
she would call him a slave?
She would call him
directly
her slave.
Interesting.
Well, they are called slaves. Like my submissives, some of them are called slaves,
right.
And it's a very actually coveted term, slave. Mm-hmm. Like if someone's my sub, it's not as special as if they're my slave. They're that's something that a lot of submissives are striving to. That's the title they're striving to achieve.
Really?
Yes.
Is the slave title?
Slave title. Especially
so counterproductive for where our society is headed over so many
especially
years.
the personally collared slave. Like I have personally collared slaves to me.
Interesting.
They are like, it's serious. It's like they're married to me, that kind of a thing,
I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just that sounded like very interesting.
Ask me anything along the
way.
way. I'll clarify anything.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like hard to say slave just based off what our history and our country. So the fact that someone wants to be called a slave is really interesting to me. But sorry, yes, we cut you off.
Yeah.
So keep going. How did you get back into this world?
I feel like it's going to happen a lot today.
Yeah, it is.
Because there's going to be a lot of interesting
Just
points.
ask me anything. Just keep me get my back on track, and I'm okay. So there's this guy that my sister's slave, and so I said, well, let me interview him for my paper. I want to interview him. And so I did, and he was this really intelligent, interesting guy who I still know. That was I would say like 30 years ago or so.
Oh, wow.
That I interviewed him, and we still know each other. He's still in my life. And then I think I wrote another paper, and I hadn't met him yet in person. This was like a phone interview and everything. And so finally my sister said, well, we were about to move. My sister and I lived together at the time. And so she said, he's going to come, my slave is going to come and help us pack. I was like, okay. And I was driving, I remember I was at my job. I was an administrative assistant, and coming home, she said, just put on a pair of high heels and boss them around, because we're going to be in this. So I was supposed to be in this role of a bossy girl or something. So I come home, and here's this guy in my living room wearing nothing but a pair of girls' panties, packing boxes. And I was like, whoa, okay, something I'd never seen before. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. It gave me a thrill. I was like,
Really?
Yeah, I was like,
It's fascinating timing, though. Like, as you're shifting and looking through the DSM and...
Well, no, he was somebody I already interviewed.
Right.
So
did you choose to go down this path, be kind of influenced by that interview, or
no, not yet.
did it just find
not yet?
This found you.
This is how it started. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm about to get into the.
Yeah.
This is how it started. So I had said nothing to this guy yet, but at one point I heard him say to my sister, "Miss, may I go to the bathroom?" And she says, "Yes, but you have to go sit on the toilet like a girl." And so he goes in there, and I noticed that the door was cracked open a little bit, like just 3 inches or so. And so I walk over there and I peek in, and he is sitting on the toilet, and I push the door wide open, and I said, "You don't get any privacy." And he looked like he was like kind of scared, That was the first thing I ever said to him, and I think that was the only thing I said to him that day. And then later on, he reached out to me and said, "You've got something here. Like, do you want to play? Do you want to dominate me?" And I was like, "Sure, okay. Like, what do I do?" And so he kind of taught me. He was the first one that kind of taught me like what he found exciting, and he was a very intellectual guy. So I found all the intellectual stuff fascinating about DS, domination and submission. And so I played with him. Like he would pay me $50 to clean my entire apartment.
He would pay you $50.
He would pay me $50
to
clean my apartment, and then I would dominate him. I would just boss him around, and we would talk. Like after the play was over, we would be like in our roles, and then after the play was over, we'd talk, and he'd be like, "Wow, it was really great when you said this," and oh, I would love for you to say something like this sometime. And like
I love how he was guiding you through this process. That's fascinating.
He was actually a lot of really good dominatrices that I know, and actually doms. Like I know a male dom who was trained by his slave.
Interesting.
He was trained by his female slave. So that's a really good way to learn, is from your submissives, and that's why I went on to write my Ph.D. dissertation on the submissive mindset. And I still have a lot of submissive psychology in my academy today. Like when I teach doms how to dominate, you have to understand the submissive mindset. That's crucial. It's because BDSM there's so much psychology in it. I say it's like 70 to 80% psychology.
How long were you practicing as a psychologist prior to this experience?
So that was when I was in my master's program. I would say I was almost finished with that, and then I went on to do my PhD in clinical psychology. And then I kept going, like I kept studying it. Like I said, I wrote my dissertation on it. So.
I'm curious, when you started your schooling, did you have a different like perspective on the type of clients you wanted to work with? Like, and do you mind me asking what that was?
I was just going to work with, normal day-to-day problems. I was going to be, my goal was to become a psychotherapist in private practice.
Right.
I wasn't interested in psychopathology. I didn't want to work with like the really serious stuff. So that's what my plan was.
And so you're a certified sexologist as well?
Yes.
So what is a certified sexologist?
So, I went through a whole course to study everything sex. It was to become a sex coach, and I got it because I still do, and I have always done like counseling or therapy, but I did not get my license as a clinical psychologist because I was working as a dominatrix this whole time. And so, if I was going to get that license, I'd probably have it taken away from me because as a professional dominatrix, working professional dominatrix, I don't believe I can do both at the same time. But as a sex coach, I can do counseling, and still work with people. I call it life coach.
How common is it for a dom to have the background that you have?
There are so many doms with psychology backgrounds. Yes, with degrees in psychology. I know so many. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And actually the best doms that I know have backgrounds in psychology and also acting.
So, I mean, we're kind of on this path where we're exploring a lot of avenues where, at least in the world of psychology and mental health, go kind of unexplored, like psilocybin treatments and alternative forms of treatment. Yeah. And it's interesting in interviewing individuals that either are shamans or they perform certain forms of treatment, whatever their modality may be, and how many of them are clinicians and how many are not, and comparing and contrasting having the expertise of the psychological background and then applying it to something that is different and something that is maybe not your normal, typical in the office one-on-one session type of thing, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I went into psychology wanting to help people.
Right. It's very interesting. I don't think that's the perspective that the general norm of people think of about BDSM and submission. Like, they don't look at it that way. You're looking at it, you're coming at it from a perspective of helping people.
Yes.
How are you using BDSM to help people? Actually, before we answer that question, can you first, two questions. Can you first define BDSM, and then how do you use BDSM to help heal people?
BDSM stands for, it's an acronym, it stands for bondage and discipline, sadism and masochism, and then the two middle initials stand for dominance and submission. So it's like an acronym inside of an acronym.
I think honestly, like the goal of these types of conversations is to normalize them.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so much negativity, and there's so much like bad labeling and like blacklisting and all these things that we do as a society over things that, again, it's fascinating because you're coming from a healing perspective and people don't think like that initially about BDSM. So anyways, you were saying, so BDSM, you define it's an acronym within an acronym.
Yeah. I do define BDSM as a healing modality because that's what we're doing. So I come from a background of Jungian psychology, and there's a Jungian psychologist I know. His name's James Fraser. I spoke to him once, and he has done a lot of men's work, and he had said that men are just as harmed by the patriarchal society as women are. I don't remember if harmed was the exact word he used, but negatively affected, or and so when men come in to see dominatrices, they have this, they're not conscious of it. They want to come and be told what to do by a hot woman because they have so much maybe like decisions that they have to make in life, and there's stress, and they just want to just like let somebody else take control. And it's kind of like, you know, when the last time that happened was when you were a little boy, or you know, maybe teenage years, all the way up to teenage years. You were told what to do by mostly women, right? Your mother was a woman, your most of your teachers were women. So it's very comforting for to be just like have a woman tell you what to do, especially if she's, you know, an in control, sexy woman. I mean, your favorite teachers were like good-looking women, kind of, you know.
I wish.
It's, but so it's, you know, it's a nice thing for men, and I'm talking about men. I'm just going to talk about men right now. And so when they're told what to do by dominatrices, it's a very relaxing. They tell me it's a relaxing experience where they feel no stress. They get into a state of mind where, you know, it's called subspace. You're in an altered state of mind when you're being told what to do. You cannot, you know, like when you're getting a massage or something, your mind's still going, you know, you can still think about the stuff or whatever. But when you're in a scene with a dom and you're being told what to do, it's not like that. You're in an altered state of mind the whole time. If you're doing a session with a dominatrix who's doing it well.
Can you compare it to something that would normally happen in one's life, like where the same psychological feeling and?
It's like a meditative state, you know, but you're not sitting still meditating.
Sure.
That makes sense because you're in the flow.
You're in the flow. Yeah. You're, if you're not let's say you're going into a flogging or something. I'm going to use the physical first. When you're being flogged, something happening to you and you have to focus. Like you have to focus on what's happening.
What is flogging?
Flogging is, there's all these toys that we use, right? And the flogger is one with a lot of usually like suede tails that, you know, I should have brought one to show you, right?
We are recording. Well, not
I should have told you to bring some.
Right?
I don't know if we could put that out there.
Yeah. And so the dominatrix uses the flogger, either one flogger or two, to hit usually the back or the buttocks of the submissive. And it can feel relaxing and painful at the same time. So something like that can definitely get you in an altered state. But even outside of that, even like just being told what to do and being, like when I'm with a submissive and they're in front of me and I say, get on your knees in front of me, kneel, eyes averted, do not look at me. You sit, you know, kneel in this position, hands behind, like I control everything. I control what they say, what they're allowed to say, where they're allowed to look, like everything. And so I tell them, you don't have to worry about a thing. I will teach you everything. I'll teach you exactly how to be the best submissive that I'd want you to be for me. And so they're relieved. Oh, thank God, I don't have to know what to do. She's going to tell me how to do it. She's going to tell me everything, you know. So that mental control, like having me just take over, it's very relaxing too.
Go ahead.
What about that has to do
But I haven't gotten to the healing.
Sorry, it's okay. We'll go all over the place. It's okay. I'm just curious, what about that piece is related to someone's sexuality, right? Because I always thought of BDSM that it had to do with sex, but there's no intercourse with BDSM.
There's no intercourse.
That's so interesting because if you watch 50 Shades of Grey, which I want to pick your brain about whether that was something that was appreciated in the world of BDSM or not, but I always thought BDSM had to do with sex. So BDSM doesn't have to do with intercourse or sex.
You can do sex if you want to, but it's not the main point. The main point is the mental domination. Yeah.
But it's still a form of pleasure too, right? I mean, it's stimulation, right?
You know, like
that's not
when
the intention
when
either.
people want to have sex as a part of it, that can happen in personal relationships, not in a professional relationship. You know?
So someone who is a dom, what is the psychology that drives someone to be a dom versus a sub?
And we talked about, let's see, there's so many questions right now on the table. Like, I believe that BDSM is a sexual orientation. Like, I believe that this is something that you are kind of born with. And even if you don't know it, you know, you have a propensity towards. Like, I'm a born Domme. When I first met my husband, I kind of tried the submissive thing a little bit, but it was like, no way, not for me, no, But I know many Doms who switch, and that's totally fine. But I do believe it's a sexual orientation because I know many, especially submissives, who this is their sex. Like, this is what turns them on, and they cannot get turned on by vanilla sex.
I was just talking to someone about that the other day. Yeah.
It's like, okay, there's a spectrum.
There is vanilla.
There's and some people a lot of submissives I know are all the way on the kink side of it, and nothing else turns them on but the kink. And then there's people who are like in the middle. Oh yeah, sure, I'll do some kink, I'll do some vanilla, like both. And there's vanillas, I think, that I think they haven't explored the kink side yet. So I think they just haven't awakened the kink part of themselves yet. That's just my personal belief.
I love that you talked about that because I'm curious why someone would not want to explore kink. Why would someone...
all the stigma.
Right. So why is there so much stigma around kink?
Yeah, I mean, that's another conversation, a whole nother conversation, right? I wasn't brought up in any type of religion, but there's a lot of people who were, and there's a lot of guilt placed upon their thinking, and like, this is bad, this is not normal, and things like that, and all those, and they just believe it.
I want to go back to the submissive and the upbringing, the background. Have you noticed that there's a lot of commonalities in the submissive in their upbringing as children?
And
their relationships with their moms or their dads.
So there's stories all over the place, you know. So I know a lot of submissives who have had a very strict, like, Catholic upbringing, and a lot of guilt, a lot of guilt in there about sexuality, about being sexual, about having sexual feelings, all of that stuff. I know someone who was brought up in a Catholic school with nuns as teachers, and they got punished with paddles, like, that turned, of course, it turned into a kink.
So did they enjoy that, or because they went through that they needed to continue doing it later on in life?
They enjoyed it, but felt very guilty about enjoying it during that young period of their life. And then, and then in adulthood, it took a lot of processing to finally accept, like, this is me, this is who I am, it's okay to feel turned on by this, But not everybody's kink comes from, like, some sort of, like, traumatic origin like that, or
right.
Some people, like, I know a submissive, one of my personal submissives, who says that they were kinky from the womb, like, born that way, and they said they even had dreams about being led around by a collar and leash by a girl, where they had not seen any images of this ever before. This is something that we do, the collar and leash. It's like a whole iconic thing.
Right.
But they were too young to have seen anything like that. So I think it's in the collective unconscious. It's like, it's really old. It's really ancient. Is
there any genetic connection to this? Like,
oh my gosh,
family systems?
I think there's something in the DNA. There is. I think
have you ever had a situation like that where it was like a father and then the son came in a couple of years later?
I'll tell you a story. It's one of my submissives who actually sadly recently passed away. And he came to me. We had a 10-year-long relationship. He came to me after he was divorced, but when he met his wife and he had this DS relationship where she was his dom. For many, many years. She dominated him, and she got him into it. She also wrote an erotic novel. Like they were a kinky couple, you know. And then now his son, his kids. He has 2 kids. One of them is a daughter who got married, and the husband took on her last name, and they are in a personal DS relationship that they admitted to me.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Have there been any studies or, I don't know, just observation on your end that people in relationship like that have more of a longevity to their relationship versus people who don't?
I don't know if there's any studies. That'd be very interesting.
It'd be interesting to me because I feel like couples that can be explorative in their sex life have a greater chance of maintaining satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I think one's resistance to exploration creates distance.
It does.
Why do you think that is?
It does. And it also drives the male submissive to see dominatrices.
And how much I love that question because we were talking about Billions and did you watch Billions?
I haven't watched a lot of them, but I was on this show where I was rating how authentic different scenes were, and that was my favorite. That was my favorite one. That was almost authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in Billions, Paul Giamatti's character and his wife, I love that show. And I loved her because she was also a very dominant, strong woman and yet was very accepting of her husband going to see a dominatrix. So I forgot what my question was, but I just, that was the question. How often do husbands keep the relationship with their dom a secret? And how often is it something that they're honestly talking about?
It's most often that they're keeping it a secret. Well, because my clients are older, in that older generation, and so there's less openness in that generation. And that was most of the time necessary to be kept from the wife, the spouse, because there wasn't acceptance on her part to play with it. There's often judgment. Oh, serious judgment too. You know, like I have a sub whose wife found a pair of his panties. Well, he likes to cross dress, and so she found a pair of panties in his belongings and got furious, thought that he was cheating on her, and he said no. He actually had to come out and admit, no, these are mine. She called him a sicko. What's wrong with you? All of these horrible, judgmental things. You know, you should go see it. You should get some help. You know, all of these things. So it was horrible. So this is what happens if you try to be open with your spouse, oftentimes, and it's very difficult. You know, now that that's out, he can't take it back. Like now she knows, and it's just forever there. And
do you ever find that the submissive is dominant at home or in other parts of their life, and then it's
usually the person has a very high powered position at work. You know.
So is that like a sense of release for them because they can't do that in their normal life?
Yeah.
I hate to
Yes, it is a
differentiate
release.
normal and not, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't really answer the healing question.
Yes, please.
But it is very healing for the submissive to come and be dominated by the dom, because having the dom not only accept his kinks but engage with him with the kinks and celebrate it with him and have her also be into it herself and derive enjoyment from his submissiveness. It's so validating for the submissive and encouraging, and it's celebrating who he really is. This person is who he is. Like that's what turns him on. And so when there's another person that can be like, I'm glad that turns you on because it turns me on that you are this way.
Yeah.
It's so healing.
Do you ever have a situation where the submissive asks you like, hey, I either want to incorporate my spouse or make them aware of, can you help me with this?
Oh yeah,
'Cause they're
that
afraid
happens
of doing
too,
it.
and I love when that happens.
Right.
I love when that happens. So sometimes because I do the kink-centered life coaching along with it, sometimes I take couples. We go into like a talking situation. We do a counseling session first, and then we'll go into the play. Oftentimes it's the husband who says, I'm kinky. I want my wife to understand this more about me. I want her to maybe even learn how to dominate me. And so we'll talk about it, go into session where I will dominate him, and she will either watch and sometimes engage with me as the co-dom, secondary dom. And then we come back to the counseling room and talk about it, like have a
Session.
have a after have after session talk session. It's great.
Is most of your clientele men?
Most of them are men. Yeah. I do have women too sometimes.
And so why is that? Why do you think there's more men than women?
Women don't have to pay for sex or sexual things, but they should. They should. More women should pay dominatrices to have it done right, because they'll go get dominated by a male partner oftentimes, and oftentimes that male partner doesn't know how to dominate, doesn't know what they're doing and isn't doing it right, and
would be doing it right be equivalent to doing it safely
too, and just bad technique and no education. You have to be educated to learn how to do this correctly. I know a lot of women who say, well, I don't like to be spanked. I've had that done to me. By who? Oh, some ex-boyfriend a long time ago. Well, because he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know how to spank you correctly.
So you teach people how to spank.
Yes.
That's so cool.
I honestly feel just like everybody would want to do this.
Right?
Like literally everybody in the world would want to do this. I think it's just this shame around sex and shame around doing it that because there's no way that nobody can be aroused unless you don't have any, bodily feelings or because of some kind of disorder or illness or whatever. But just touch and feel I feel like everybody across the board would appreciate it and enjoy this.
Yeah. Being open to it would be the first step.
Yeah, I feel like that's the hardest part, right? And so are there a lot of male doms out there because do you feel that women gravitate more towards the male doms than the female doms? Is there
depends.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I also want to talk about the healing aspect for the dom too.
Please.
To have gone through, that was something I didn't expect, because I grew up in Los Angeles in a traditionally Chinese household. My parents stressed that education was most important. I'm glad for that, because I agree with that. But they also told me that it's kind of like a children are seen not heard type of environment. Opinions from the children aren't really encouraged, and as a female Chinese girl, when you're quiet and demure and obedient, like those descriptive terms, that's what you want to be. That's when you're considered a good child, to the parents. And so I had all these feelings. I had all these thoughts. I had all these things I wanted to express, and I started doing that. But I was seen as more of the rebellious child, because I started to, especially in my teenage years, started to really express myself. My sister was the quieter one, and so she was more seen as the good child.
Which is funny, because she's the one that introduced you to this world,
She
right?
did, yeah, but she's got a different demeanor, she is quieter.
That's funny.
And so when I started becoming a dominatrix and ordering my subs around and just really using my voice, not only just my voice, but my dominant voice, and being in control, and just it was very healing for me as growing up as a quiet, demure, shy. And I did grow up to be shy because my voice was shut down. Girl, it was healing for me. It empowered me. It empowered me quickly, very quickly. And then when I started working with submissive clients and then seeing, so I grew up sort of with this negative outlook on boys and men. And that was it was not a very healthy outlook. It was kind of all brought up by my mom, who kind of had these traumas from childhood too, and another story, but I kind of looked down upon men, like in my teenage years, I kind of mistreated my boyfriends and stuff. I was kind of bitchy and on all that. So I thought, oh yeah, I can be a dominatrix. That's easy. I can be a bitch, But then when I started working with male submissive clients and seeing them be vulnerable to me and trusting me, my heart opened up. God, they want to give themselves to me. And so this love started pouring out of me. I was like, what's going on with me? I'm healing myself and I'm loving men more. It's this whole thing that happens, and it just keeps happening. It's still, the Domme journey is an ongoing journey. It's still happening.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I feel like it's giving oneself permission to express themselves, because I feel like in our culture, we can be very black and white in who we are. And I feel like this gives people permission to express all the various different parts of self.
Yes.
And I think for men too, men have so much pressure to be in this world, to be the fixers, to be the providers, that these other parts don't necessarily get to be explored, where they can just be submissive and soft and vulnerable.
Yes.
I could totally see how that could be transmute shame into, like you said, ecstasy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like if there's anybody in a power leader role, because I'm sure there's a lot of women that are in power leadership roles that would benefit from being a submissive and letting go of that power and stress.
I have a lot of very powerful women in my academy.
Yeah.
There are, oh my gosh, high calibered women in my academy. They're so impressive.
Yeah.
And I have dominated quite a few of them.
Wow.
Because it's become this tradition. I was dominated by my mentor. I had 2 female mentors, dominatrices. And so when I was learning, I said, I wanted to be dominated by one of them. I said, just treat me like a slave. I want to feel everything. I want to feel how it feels to be on that side of it. I don't know how I could learn how to do this side of it without learning the submissive side, and just really feeling it. And so I learned a lot from that. And I recommended it. So I've dominated several of my mentees now at this point, and they've all gained a lot from that.
You said academy. It's a schooling. It's a community. Can you talk a little bit more about what the community of BDSM looks like? And
so it's a little different. My academy is the Evolutionary Dominatrix Academy, and it's a worldwide academy. I have students in the U.S., Canada, Europe, Australia. It's incredible. There's such a strong sisterhood in my academy from these DOMs all over the world, because we meet every week on we met yesterday actually on a Zoom call with me. We do a live class every week. So
with the submissive, an actual student.
I have 5. I call them sub coaches. They're submissive coaches who are in my academy, and they teach alongside me, because you can't learn the art of female domination without learning the psychology of the submissive. So they teach. So what happens is the student will dominate live, on the Zoom call, either with her submissive, with her in person with her, or on Zoom with one of my submissives, and we watch. It's called fishbowl. We all watch, and then afterwards,
pressure.
oh yeah, it's they get nervous.
Yeah,
yes, it's big. It's a thing. That's why we call it a fishbowl domination. We all watch, and then after they're done, I critique them on how they did. I said, you could have done this more dominantly. You could have said this stronger. You could have said this in this different way. I'll critique them, and then the sub coaches will also bring in their feedback and say, oh, yes, if you said it this way. For me, it would have been much more of a turn on to hear it like this, Oh my God, they grow so fast. They grow so fast.
And it sounds like you have to really be adaptive to your client, right? Because how you feel is different. How this person's going to feel like. So if I say something, is it like a universal thing where if you just say this thing, everybody would be feeling great about it?
So there are some things that are universal,
right?
General things, and then there are very subjective, personal, preferences that each submissive has.
So what are the characteristics of a submissive?
They generally want to be told what. So I'm going to describe submissive versus bottom because that's a distinction that I don't think a lot of people understand too. Like a bottom likes to have stuff done to them. Like let's say we're taking like spanking or something. A spanking bottom likes to be spanked and have that and like, oh yeah, do that to me. That feels good. Oh yeah, keep going. Yeah, that feels good. So that's a bottom. A submissive would never give those kind of orders. That's called like topping from the bottom. A submissive doesn't top from the bottom. Like they will just take it and be told what to do and just submissively and respectfully submit to their dom. So they will oftentimes use the dominance honorifics, like call her mistress or goddess, and say, thank you, mistress, thank you, goddess, and please, and all of those things. And they're very obedient. They like to be told what to do. Does that, I don't know.
Yeah. It sounds like the bottom is somewhat dominant as well. Right?
No, the bottom is more, it's when you're playing top and bottom dynamic, you're more like two people who are on somewhat equal levels playing with each other.
Got it.
Two play partners who just want to do kiki stuff with each other, Whereas the dominant and submissive, it's more of a formal,
right,
like dynamic, where you're my submissive. You speak when I tell you to speak. You speak only the words I tell you to speak. Like that. It's like.
Now, are those rules defined prior to the relationship starting, or is this something you kind of learn about each other as you go along?
Like when I have a client come in, they'll tell me what their fantasies are. Like I want to be, most of the time I have submissives that come to me, but I do have bottoms coming to me too. So they'll tell me exactly what their whole fantasy is, and then I craft my session around their fantasy. Like I use that as a structure.
So you don't try to change them.
No, you can't.
Right.
No.
Like no, you're going to be a submissive, not
no.
Right.
You can't change what they're into.
Interesting.
You respect that, and like it won't work if a bottom's a bottom. And I've tried it. Like one of my bottoms is like, well, would you like me to call you mistress?
That's interesting.
I'm like, I like being called mistress. He's like, okay, I'll try it. And he was like, is it okay if I don't? It just doesn't come natural. I said, it's fine. Call me Damiana. It's fine.
So sessions can be pretty flexible if that's discussed beforehand.
It's always discussed beforehand.
So there's consent beforehand.
Yes.
Right, which is, again, I think unfortunately it hasn't been portrayed properly a lot in some films and television where there's it borderlines abuse.
Yes. Yeah.
And speaking of that, regarding to the pain that is inflicted with certain types of toys or certain types, like spanking someone or hitting someone with a flogger?
Mm-hmm.
Why would someone like pain? Why does someone develop why does someone develop pleasure from pain?
Mm-hmm. The pleasure from pain, if we're just talking about the pain, just pain by itself, the pleasure comes from the release of endorphins. Mm-hmm. But from talking to lots and lots of submissives, that's not their goal. The goal isn't like, oh, because I want my body to get a body high. The goal is they want to submit to the dominatrix because she's the one that's giving the motivation to get through the difficult thing, Like I have a masochist submissive, he's one of my sub-coaches, and he's a huge masochist. He loves all that heavy play. But he's described being flogged by a dom who's just going through the motions, just robotically, just going through the motions. He describes that as like no connection. He's like, she might as well, I just feel like she's flogging a tree. Like I feel like I'm in this, I feel like I'm not even here. No connection. She might be back there just doing this and just going through her grocery list or whatever. That's not domination, She's not dominating him. She's just flogging. And that kind of flogging is not as enjoyable as if the dom was in it, flogging him, telling him, you submit to me. I want you to take more pain from me. You take more pain from me, you know.
It was like vanilla sex, right? Like if you're just hitting somebody, it's like the same as vanilla and not really.
Oh yeah, you can
that intimate relationship.
You can always analogize everything with vanilla sex to understand it better.
Right.
Yeah. If someone's just going through the motions, it's just like, you know, you can feel that they're not even there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Could you please delve into the dominatrix archetype? So I read that you have the authoritarian, the seductress, the mother, and the queen.
Yeah.
So do you believe that as a woman that women have all these archetypes that exist in them in the unconscious?
I do. Yeah. I developed the dominatrix archetype methodology as a technique to teach domination to my students, and as a way to teach them how to develop these the specific styles that they have in their domination. Because, you know, you'll see most of the time in like the movies, you'll see only an authoritarian style of domination. It's like the bossy, bitchy, you know, woman that's just ordering them about. That's the authoritarian. But there's so many different, all of these other styles. Like you've got to have the seductress in there too. The seductress archetype is the one that, like if I tell you, you take this pain from me. I love it when you take pain from me because it turns me on when you take pain from me. I love to see you suffer for me, suffer for me. That is the seductress. And then the submissive will be like, I want to suffer for you, mistress. Yes, I do. I want to suffer for. It provides that motivation. Like
that would be the seductress?
That's the seductress.
Interesting. I would think it would be something else.
The seductress is sexy, is a sexy woman, but she's the one that kind of lures him into the trap of doing something difficult, you know? Why would you want to do something difficult for someone? Like, she's telling me to. She wants me to. She says it turns her on, so I've got to do it. You know, I've got to do it for her. You know, like so. The seductress isn't just okay. Like let's think of I'm thinking of Sharon Stone in what's that movie?
Yes,
Basic Instinct.
Yeah,
she's a classic seductress.
Right.
She's luring. They're doing things to. They're not even knowing it. They're doing things to her will because she's so sexy and seductress and knows what she wants that she gets it. You know.
Yeah, I like that word luring. That feels...
It's a very luring
so it's like
quality.
And when you're doing a session with someone, are all these archetypes coming out, or is it typically one or two?
For me, they do.
Okay.
For me, pretty much every session, they all come out because they're all developed in me. At this point in my life, they've all been developed, and that's how I discovered these archetypes. But in a young dominatrix, she might have like one very strong archetype that's coming through, but the other ones are not quite as developed yet, you know. So let me describe the other. So the queen, the mother archetype is very important. That's the nurturing, not just nurturing, but she provides the guidance in the session. So she guides and says, you know, I'm spanking you because I know what's best for you. I'm spanking you so that you can become a better submissive to me. You know, you do what I say because I know you better than you do. Like I know what you need to do in order to become a good submissive. She also comes into play during the negotiation part, like before the scene, and she comes in the aftercare. There's always a negotiation before scene and aftercare. And so she's there during those the bookends of the session too. So she provides if a submissive didn't feel safe, then they would be in an anxiety. They would be anxious the whole time, taking a flogging or something. They would feel unsafe. They'd be like, but if he knows that her mother archetype is in her strong, it's not conscious on their part. But if he feels safe with her, oh, she knows what she's doing. She knows what she's doing. Then, you know, that's a very necessary part of the Dom too, is that the mother archetype. And a lot of the younger Doms who are just starting out don't have quite their mother archetype all that developed yet. And so that's why a lot of submissives don't feel that safe with inexperienced Doms. And then the queen archetype is the she's the one that that men want to come and worship. They are in awe of her. She's the one that says, not only allow the subs to worship, but I require you to worship me. Get on your knees and worship me. Worship me right now. Look upon me. I mean, I give you permission now to look upon me, and worship me. Like maybe with your eyes, with your look on my legs, look at my feet. Like the female form is magical. It's like there's a lot of mystique to it. There's so much beauty, right? And men have, I feel that men have a primal need to worship the feminine, and so the queen archetype. That's where a lot of the divine feminine comes through in the queen archetype. So that is the archetype where the submissives feel like this is the spiritual aspect. Like this is oftentimes they describe this as their religion. Like they describe me as their religion. They have something to worship.
What's the mama ayahuasca?
Yeah.
Very, very similar experience where when you're in that phase, you're listening to her guidance and through your journey. You mentioned that, you obviously, how long have you been practicing BDSM?
I've been a professional dominatrix this is my 24th year.
24th year.
It's been over 30 years though that I've been in it.
Right. So, and you mentioned that during the play there, if someone is not experienced enough or educated enough, that they might not understand how to truly handle a submissive. How does someone who is looking to explore this world, how do they assess whether a Dom is qualified or not?
Yeah.
And what are the credentials that they look at? Are there credentials, like aside from, or inclusive of what you have? Like how does someone assess if someone is appropriate for them?
When someone's looking for like a professional dominatrix, they will need to find out, they should find out, research. They should do their research on the Dom and where did she get her training? She has to have had some training as a dominatrix, either by a mentor or have gone through some schooling. My domination school is the only one that I know of right now that is certifying dominatrices. That's why I created it, because I felt like there should be some standards to this practice. There's so much harm that can be done physically and psychologically.
I really believe what you say, that it's healing, because I often feel like the shadow parts of self that harm people because it's not embraced, it's not loved.
Yeah.
This is how I think really negative experiences happen with sex. So instead of going, I don't have this part of me, well, what if you do? And how do we safely explore it? And what if it's not bad, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of that, what is a fetish? And how does a fetish happen? Like, why does someone want to worship a foot versus someone who doesn't want to worship a foot?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Why does someone love ass and someone loves dick at the same? Like, why does that? How does someone like one versus the other?
Yeah, that's it. I think nobody knows that.
Yeah.
The answer to that, but like there's theories. I know one of my slaves who has a foot fetish, who says his very first memory of being fascinated by a foot was when he said he was 3 years old, and he was in the back seat of a car, kind of like wrestling around with his cousin or something, and his mom was driving, and his aunt was in the passenger side seat, and she brought her high-heeled foot over. I don't know how, but she did, and she put her high heel on his hand, his 3-year-old hand, and said, "You stop." And she said, "You guys stop, messing around back there or whatever.
You take your foot off her hand."
And he said he had this visual. He has this memory. He has a physical cellular memory of the high-heeled foot on his hand, and just being like, oh, and there it happened.
That's so crazy that one instant.
Yeah. But we don't know. I mean, that's just, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I feel like this is seen a lot in films. is choking.
Uh-huh.
What is the psychology of someone who wants to choke versus someone who likes being choked?
I can speak to the
Yeah.
wants to choke.
Yeah.
Likes to choke. For me as a dom, I love the feeling of choking someone because it brings on this, it's a turn on too. It brings on this, I watch my submissive, I watch them being helpless. I watch them suffering for me. Like they're submitting to me. Like they're voluntarily doing this for me, and so for them to just do that and under my hand too, like I can feel them tremble under there, and I'm doing this safely, of course. Everything's like controlled. I'm not doing anything to an unsafe, harmful degree. It's a rush. It's like this power high. So
Power.
it's a power thing, yeah, and that can be a turn on.
I'm always fascinated by the individual that dresses up in pantyhose and like a maid's outfit and walks around a party with a collar being showcased. Can you talk about that? Like what is the psychology of an individual that enjoys the pleasure of shame and
Yeah. Like it's humiliating too, right? Yeah.
I mean, is it? I don't want to assume that
Humiliation
it's
a turn on to be humiliated. It's
Why?
a turn on. Because it's something. So anything kink is like it's exciting because it's something that should not be happening. Like everything.
we avoid being shamed, right? Our whole
Yeah.
lives, and then this is an opportunity for us to.
Yeah, like okay, so I'm gonna try to explain like in a like when you think about a vanilla sex situation, it's naughty. It's a turn on because it's naughty. Like it's not a turn on because you're procreating. It's a turn on because it's animalistic and dirty, right? Like that's the turn on part of it, right? Like if you're just doing it to procreate, you might as well be
Sheets.
under a sheet. So
Let's not get into
right?
religion.
Yeah, I was about to go there.
Let's not get into religion.
So the more so when it pushes the kink envelope, you're going towards the what is even more wrong and what is even more wrong and more wrong. Like
do you
that's
see
the
that progression
psychology.
in your clients? Like
Yeah.
starting off at a certain level and then just getting to a complete whole other level.
Yes, I've done 8-hour-long humiliation sessions.
Like, you're kidding.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So like at a party, or is it in a room? It just designed.
So there's different. Okay, so let me take like golden showers. That's a fascinating topic,
Is
right?
that happens?
Oh yeah.
People get peed on
Oh yeah.
and they enjoy it.
In my podcast, I have a whole episode about golden showers, and so I interview 4 different submissives about golden showers. They're all clients or subs of mine, and each one of them has a different reason why it's hot for them.
Not because the pee is hot, but because it's hot for them.
Not because
was
it's
just
not
making a
temperature,
joke,
not
yeah.
temperature hot.
Temperature of the pee.
But so like one of them likes I'm picturing all of them right now and describing. You can go listen to the episode if you want. But one of them, for them, the whole golden shower aspect is hot because they're fascinated with the female anatomy and just having it come out of the female anatomy towards them. It's this whole like, oh my God, this is so.
And women are the same with men doing it? Like that's just the same fascination?
I haven't actually interviewed women. No, actually I know one woman who liked being peed on. It was more of the humiliation aspect. But it wasn't like the fascination of it coming out of
a woman.
the dick for her.
That actually makes a lot of sense. If you said that men have this innate need to worship the feminine, that they would be drawn towards being peed on. Like that makes sense to me.
Like for him, he said the female genitals, it's always been a great mystery to him. And so to have it like coming out and watching it, it's like for him, it was like such a turn on because it was just this whole fascination with the female anatomy. So for him, it was that. For another submissive, it was a humiliation aspect. The golden shower, being peed on, is humiliating. And so being humiliated with that, it's so bad and so wrong. And like this is, and I feel like I feel dirty. She's being peed on me. I'm at a very low level. I'm being play abused by her peeing on me. 'Cause she's abusing me in this way. It's a play abuse,
This is going to be the most listened to part of the podcast, by the way.
Okay. And so for him, it was humiliation. For another one, it was worship. To drink, like for this submissive, I put it in a wine glass and I give it to this submissive, and they drink it, and they drink every drop and they savor every drop, and this is a worshipful feeling for them. And this submissive calls me goddess, because what's coming out of me as like waste that I'm throwing away, for them, they're worshiping it. They're like, don't throw away anything from your body. This is something that I treasure, So it's a worshipful aspect for this submissive. And then for the other one, for the other submissive, I'm thinking of the last one, they are my personally colored slave. And for them, I just forced them to drink I just forced them to drink it because he is my no limits slave. Like we don't negotiate things in this relationship anymore. It's called a consensual non-consent relationship. And so for this slave, I never even asked if it was okay for me to like make him drink my pee. It was just like, you're doing it. And so for him, it's a turn on because they're complete and total slave to me.
Sure.
Like it was my desire. The desire came from me. The others, it came from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, be honest. Was there ever a point in your entire career where you were like, holy shit, this is weird?
Okay, let me think. I'm sure there has.
I mean,
I'm sure there.
Because for the outside, like this is listening to this is fascinating. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, holy shit, there's people out there that like really love this stuff.
Probably more than we think, honestly.
Probably.
So, but were you ever like, okay, I'll do it, but this is.
Oh, I think because I was born kinky, when the whole idea of peeing on someone first came into my consciousness, it was like, oh, okay.
Really?
Like it was
that easy?
Literally like, oh, okay. But I remember during my like early years of being a Dom, I went out to dinner with a group of people and I said something like, oh yeah, I was just peeing on someone earlier today. And the people at the table I didn't really know, they were like, they got all uncomfortable.
Really?
And I was like, oh yeah, you people are vanilla. Forgot. Because it was so, for me, it's just like, why is it so weird? I don't know. Like it's the human body. It comes out. Everybody pees. But
it's not the process of peeing. It's like what you do with the pee. It's not something that we're normally used to doing. Mm-hmm. So that's why I feel like people, what's the word where you're doing the opposite, the coming from the other hole? Is it called bukkake? What is it?
It's called a scat play.
Scat play?
Yeah, brown showers.
Shitting on people?
Yeah, shitting on people.
That's a real thing.
I don't do that.
That's a real thing. I've seen a video.
Okay, so that's not.
Are you talking about Two Girls, One Cup?
Okay, we could talk about that.
No.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk
Two Girls, One Cup?
No.
Or shitting on people?
No,
shitting on people.
Oh, sure. I mean,
we could talk about
why
that.
Not?
It's a whole thing.
I really want to know, why do people enjoy it?
Okay, that one. Okay, then that's one that I don't get.
You don't get.
I don't get that one.
We got it, ladies and gentlemen. We figured it out.
I don't get that from the submissive point, or I guess I don't get it from the Dom point of view either. But I am not judging. I have to say, I'm not judging.
You would do it.
No,
I
mean I've done it.
You've done
That's
it.
how I know I don't like it. But okay, so we could talk about this.
Yes.
Like, I know many Doms, many Doms who do the brown showers. It's a popular thing.
Right.
In fact, I've thrown parties at my dungeon where that was being done, and I will never do it again because it was
cleanup.
It was but I don't want to talk about it in such a negative way because
sure.
I'm a lot of my friends are into this, and so it's just not my thing. It's just not my thing. But I can kind of get mentally like what the turn on is because it's something that's wrong and dirty and very, very limit pushing. It's a very limit pushing thing for the submissive. Yeah. And so I can kind of get why it's a turn on. But there's the whole aspect of the smell and all that kind of stuff too that I don't know how. So I know I have a sub that had the fantasy of it, and then he went and did it, and he was like, no, I can't get into the real. Like I can get into the in my head part, but I can't get into the real. The real part is there's too much going on. That's not. It's too
So interesting. My mind just went into another direction, but I don't know if it's
could talk-
appropriate to bring it up.
We just talked about shitting on people.
Well, let's say a dom is on her period.
Yeah,
that's an
that's
interesting-
called Roman
Showers.
Roman shower. I think it's
There's a
called,
lot
is that
of
called
fucking
Roman showers? Yeah, that's called Roman showers, I think.
But
Yeah.
that's like, I feel like a lot of men don't care about fucking a woman if she's
No. But drinking the blood.
drinking.
Oh yeah, there's a whole thing where like I know doms have like
Yeah, I've had
will
sex
will,
when-
will
on
do that
period
and then
Yeah.
she'll make him like suck her tampon out.
Oh,
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That's a lot.
no, I've met men who would want to do that. It is interesting. It's like
That's very
if you
there's-
really worship
it's
the
a fetish.
feminine
Yeah.
and
That's
I
it's,
could
it's
understand.
But hold on,
sacred.
let's-
It's sacred,
let's
right?
Let's take it back. Is that because they've already pushed the limits and they just need to keep going?
Well,
and there's that's the next level.
You can compare it to the golden showers. There's many reasons. There's one sub that might be like humiliated by it. There's another sub that might be worshipful of the divine feminine menstrual blood. So there's all these different personal
It's interesting.
reasons.
Has anybody ever asked you to the pain level to get to a place where they're bleeding
Oh yeah,
and they want to bleed?
yeah. It's like it's an honor to bleed for mistress.
well, see let's go there because
My business mind is just thinking liability. Like,
well, what is
but-
the difference between wanting someone else to make you bleed versus someone who self-harms and cuts?
Bleeding for a mistress, it's a different thing. It's like a sacrificial gift, So
Interesting.
yeah,
That's a very interesting line because
and also-
I see where you're going with
and
that.
also the submissive doesn't necessarily come in and say, "I want you to make me bleed," because it's a very topping from the bottom like mindset. The bleeding is all from the dom. Like I want to mark you, and I want to mark you to the point where you bleed for me. Like it comes from the dom.
Do you is there like a questionnaire or something that you go over with the clients? Is there like an admission process?
Many DOMs use questionnaires. I don't do a questionnaire because for me, my personal preference is it's not personal enough. So I interview on the phone. First I told my client who's going through the process of application to just tell me, give me a general idea of what you're into. And then he'll write me the email. And then they pay for a phone interview with me, and then we'll have a phone conversation, and then we'll get to know each other. And then I'll talk to them like this, just on a person-to-person level. And then we get to know each other because it's not just I'm interviewing you to see if you're right for me. I tell them you're interviewing me too to see if I'm a right fit for you. So because we're going to be playing together, so we want to see if it feels good on both parts.
How many male doms exist?
There's fewer male doms who are professionals than female doms. There are more professional female doms, but in the lifestyle, there's a lot of male doms in the lifestyle scene.
Because what if you're a female, but you don't want to be dominated by a female dom, you want to be dominated by a male dom?
Mm-hmm. There's a huge community, BDSM community, that's not in the professional realm like I'm in the professional kind of BDSM community. There's a lifestyle community, and there's a lot of male doms in that community. You can go and meet, mingle and meet and go to these parties and meet people.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I want to sidetrack a little bit because there's a lot of avenues here with BDSM, but from a personal level, I really want to talk about how this experience, this journey, this professional direction that you've gone in the past 24 to 30 years, how it's affected your family from a private side and like your children and the relationship that you have. Do they know what you do? How much detail do you go in? Like,
Sure.
I'm really fascinated
Yeah.
by that, as much as you're willing to share.
So, I'm willing to share everything.
Yeah.
It's good. My parents don't really know what I do. They know that I teach. They know that I'm a psychologist. My dad read my entire dissertation, which was, I wrote that in 2005, and it was called The Erotically Submissive Man. He read it, and he knew that I was into this from a psychological, intellectual perspective, but they don't know that I'm into it in real life. But I am going to be writing a book soon, like in this next few months, and my dad's been, he's an intellectual person. He's like, when are you going to actually write that book to publish? And I said, I'm going to do it soon. So he's like, okay, then he's dying to be my editor and stuff. So I'm going to write it. I'm going to write it, and I'm going to let him read it. And by this point in my life, I'm I'm just going to be out with it with them. And so I think it's going to be okay. With my kids, so I have a daughter who's 17. This month, actually, she's turning 17. Another daughter who's 13. Yeah. And I'm very close with them. I have a very healthy relationship with both of them. They know that I'm a psychologist. They know that I do therapeutic work. My 17-year-old daughter, when she was 10, she was actually asking me a lot of questions about what I do. And she's like, why don't you ever take me to work? Like and it was getting to the point where there was some trust being broken because she didn't believe what I was saying anymore, what I was telling her anymore. So I took her to my dungeon at 10 years old. I took her and I said, this is where I work. I said, I do a type of therapy where we do like role play, and my clients and I do this role play with each other, and it's a very healing dynamic that we do. I said, I see them, I accept everything about them. Sometimes they come to me with embarrassing types of things, and I just love them for it. I told her a very age-appropriate definition of what I do. And she was like, wow, that's really neat, And and then after that, I said, do you feel better that you saw my work? She's like, yes. And she hasn't seen it since. She hasn't seen it since.
Have you ever been judged for what you do?
By them? We're talking about my kids?
Just by people.
Yeah, we can talk about that too.
Well, yeah, let's focus on the family aspect.
Sorry.
So my older daughter has known that I'm a dominatrix since age 10. My younger one has never cared. She has a different personality. She was never inquisitive like that. So I just tell her I'm a therapist, My older one, she doesn't know the specifics of what I do, but she's, I tell her a little bit more.
If she asked, would you be open to discussing those things?
If she asked, I would tell her. Yeah. If she asked me a question that was like, Mommy, do you hurt people? I would explain it. I would explain it to her.
Right.
But my older one, she said, you're different from my other my friends' parents. I said, how so? She said, because you take the time to know and want to know each and every one of my friends, and you want to know them, and you know about them, and you kind of intuitively know more about them than, and my friends' moms don't really do that. So she said I can see, I know what it was. Her friends were asking, what is it like to have a mom who's a therapist? And she said, she wants to know more about my friends. She has a true interest in knowing each and every one of you. So I know this is not part of your question, but
no, I mean it is actually, because it's fascinating. I mean, you have two lives. That you have your home life, you have your work life, and it's the magic of blending the two, right? And
yeah, I know I want to know the whole person, and this is when I have clients. Yeah, I know this person as a submissive. I also know who they are as a father. I know who they are at work. I know their whole being. This is knowing the whole person. So I guess I kind of I bring that into the other parts of my life. Why would I just want to just know just a part of you? It's not as, I see all of who you are, and they feel good when I see all of who they are.
Yeah.
So
does your daughter follow you on Instagram?
I don't think so. And I think that's fine. I think that's good that
Yeah.
yeah. But if she's seen it before.
Yeah.
She's seen it. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then you had the question.
Well, I often feel like people who judge are people that have shame about liking the thing that they're judging.
Yeah.
I often feel that way. So I'm curious, we live in a culture where there's a lot of quote unquote vanilla people that are boring and don't have don't care about exploring things, right?
Yeah.
So and then judge people.
Yep.
So I'm curious if you've experienced any judgment from people around being a dominatrix.
People who judge are afraid of what they're judging. That's what it comes down to. They're afraid of that topic, that subject. You know, and they just want to end it there. They want to cut it off and end it there and come off with judgment and not go further into it. I personally believe it's something that they're scared of. So yeah, I have been judged. And those people are pretty much not a part of my life. It's a good way to find out who your friends are.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about is why someone would be scared to explore this part of themselves, like the part of themselves that likes dark sex or the part of themselves that likes to be blindfolded, that likes fetishes. Why?
Yeah.
And I know at the root of it is probably shame, but why would someone be scared to explore the dark parts of themselves?
I think that it challenges their self-identity. Like they don't want to see themselves as dirty. They want to see themselves as good. And I don't think that they can grasp that they can be good and dirty at the same time.
I love that.
You know? But they can.
Do you ever have someone that comes to you that hasn't had an experience like this before, but is in the explorative stages where
I've had many first timers. Yeah.
like a first timer.
Yeah.
Like,
and
how do they end up finding you? Like, what is this?
I'm so happy that they find me and have my and then
they're really
they
lucky that they found you in their first time. Like that's
I've had those and I tell them thank you for doing your research and I'm glad that I'm your first experience because you had it done right, you know, because I've also had the opposite. I've had people that have come to me who've had traumatic experiences being dominated, who are mistreated and had a bad experience somehow. And they had a gap of 5 or 10 years where they didn't want to do it again because of that, you know? And so I provide like a healing experience where I said, you know that this is what it's about, not that. You know?
Is there a blacklist, a client blacklist?
Yeah, there's a blacklist.
Just to protect the dom.
I think it's kind of like I don't remember. I don't look at it. I don't remember what the name of it is now because sorry. But I think it's like a list that both doms and escorts look at. So I think I don't really look at it because of that, because it's like escort clients and dom clients aren't the same type of clients. But I have a blacklist of my own that I keep that I share with my renters.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I have to wrap this up because we have someone else coming on the show in 3 minutes.
No problem.
I desperately want to have you back on.
I would love to be back on.
I really
we could talk forever on this.
I know. I have so many questions.
I want this to be like a part 1 and part 2. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto the show, for your vulnerability, just for your honesty, and just I think giving this permission for people to be themselves. For people to find you on Instagram, where can they find you?
My handle is at Damiana Chi, Ph.D. on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. My website is also DamianaChiPhD.com. It's a links page actually. So you can find everything on that one.
Yeah. We'll definitely share that as well.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming and being honest and open. I really appreciate that.
I'm appreciative of the opportunity to share because I think it's important to educate about this. It's a very it's a topic that not a lot of people know about.
Absolutely. And again, I'm sorry afterwards if there's any ignorant questions, but I think that's the fascination.
There's no such thing as an ignorant question.
Yeah.
So ask away.
I appreciate that. So thank you.
We will have you back.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.